Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. We're counting 678 days since the brutal attack by the Hamas terror organization and its affiliates from the Gaza Strip to the villages and towns surrounding the Gaza Strip. And since then, after massacring 1,200 people and taking 250 Israelis and other foreign nationals as kidnapping them to Gaza, we find ourselves 678 days later, after going full circle throughout the Middle East to a 7-front war, back to Gaza as the main focus, and still 50 hostages being held in brutal conditions in the Gaza Strip. To analyze the issues of the day, probably mainly Gaza, of course, but trying to go to other arenas, I'm joined here by 3 experts. First and foremost, TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Shalom, Amir.
Hi.
Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kuperwasser, former head of the research division in the IDF intelligence, and also Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. And last but not least, Brigadier General in the Reserves Doron Gavish, who is the commander of the Israeli Air Force Air and Missile Defense Task Force. Shalom and welcome to all of you. Amir, let's start from you, and I imagine you're going to take me to Gaza, but can you give us the highlights of the day? And hint, I would like to understand what is going on with the delegation in Cairo and parallel the second track in Qatar.
So essentially, the IDF-Hamas front is in a holding mode. The Israeli Security Cabinet has directed the military to draw up plans to take over Gaza, and they use the term take over because it's either occupy or control. But first of all, to go forward and take the most important positions, clear up whatever pockets of resistance there are of Hamas, both above and underground, and perhaps go on later to the targets a bit south of Gaza in the so-called central refugee camps. But while the military is undertaking the staff work, preparing their plans and probably training the headquarters and some of the troops, there are also hints that maybe we are all going back to the negotiating table, either in Cairo or in Doha. There are mediating efforts, but right now they are only talking about talking.
General Kuperwasser, could it be, following what Mr. Oren just said, that we don't actually intend to launch this next phase, but this is rhetoric in order to pressure the other side? Because if we do go to the next phase of taking over the entire Gaza Strip, we're talking about a prolonged war of many months with mounting pressure from the world.
I think these two options do not exclude each other. We are preparing ourselves to launching the attack. And the more seriously we do that, there are greater chances that Hamas will take it as a turning point and will finally consider seriously the option of a deal. And because, you see, there are two things that Hamas is worried about most. One is that it is going to be overthrown from government in Gaza by the population of Gaza, is going to blame him for the suffering they are going through. And the chances of that happening are small, but it's not totally impossible. And the second thing that is worrying Hamas is that Israel will force him out of power in Gaza. And that's what Israel prepares to do now. And they are worried that if this is going to happen, they're not going to be in a position to claim that the 7th of October was a good idea. Because this is what the war is all about from Hamas point of view and also from an Israeli point of view. Was the 7th of October a success for the Palestinians or was it a disaster? Now, even if they pay a very heavy price with people losing their lives and with the destruction of Gaza, if eventually they are going to stay in power in Gaza, they are going to be able to say, yes, it was costly, but all in all, it was a successful idea. And they want to be in a position that they will be able to say so. That's why they are ready now, in my mind, to reconsider the refusal to go for a deal. They refused to go to a deal because their basic assumption was that Israel is not going to take the initiative in order to take over the entire Gaza Strip, because Israel is not interested in paying the prices that go along with that. And that was their assumption. But now they have a second thought, and Israel is trying to convince us that it is something that we are ready to do. Not happily, but we are ready to do that in spite of the crisis. And this puts Hamas in a different position. And that's why they sent Khalil al-Hayya to Cairo to discuss the options. Israel is saying now that forget about the options, forget about the Witkoff proposal, although allegedly it's still on the table from Hamas point of view. Israel says, no, forget about it. We want a full deal with the release of all the hostages, not a partial deal. We'll see what Hamas is going to say about that, and we'll see what Israel is going to say. We heard Netanyahu saying, no way. But what is going to say when Hamas says, okay, we accept the Witkoff deal, we refused to accept it before, now we are ready to accept it. Here are 10 living hostages, take them. Give us in return 60 days of ceasefire. Is Israel going to accept it or not? I don't know. It's not going to be an easy decision to make.
Well, throughout this war, it was many times hard to understand what real intentions are, sometimes for operational security reasons, but perhaps also other reasons. Now maybe we understand a bit better what Israel is trying to achieve. And General Gavich, I want to ask you, and also in this question, I'm going to be a bit cynical. What doesn't the world get? The Israeli government says Hamas is still there, vowing to destroy Israel, vowing to do another October 7th, and we can't allow that continue. That's the main lesson from October 7th. Germany doesn't understand this. UK doesn't understand this. What doesn't the world get?
But Jonathan, this is a good question because I think that it is not only us. By the way, we are being backed up in a very strong way by the United States, and still we see that mainly in Europe and of course South America, we hear it completely different voices. I think that it's a combination of first a lot of images that are continuously coming from the Gaza Strip, a lot of manipulation that is being done by the Hamas, a lot of push by the Muslim, which is a very big community, mainly in Europe, a lot of political interest, and you blend everything into a pile and you get what we've seen. It's hard to understand. How could they not understand that this is counterproductive? I mean, once the Hamas is praising them for their idea of recognizing the Palestinian country. Once the Hamas is the one who is with them, they should understand that something is being done wrong by them. Of course, this is a very bad message. And so I think this is one of our main challenges, probably to be able to again and again to explain and to try to change the narrative around the world, to do a very, very tough diplomatic job on the G level, but also in other levels. This is for sure one of our challenges.
I gave the warning before the question, and I have to be honest that this war now, it's not 100% in consensus in Israel. Like any other issue, it's debatable. There were different options on the table. The government took a specific track, and there are many voices in Israel that things could be done differently. And of course, the issue of the hostages is the main sensitive issue in the Israeli public, at least. Mr. Oren, I want to ask you, before this war, we were on a positive track towards normalization with Saudi Arabia expanding the Abraham Accords, and it seems that this sidetracked that. Perhaps maybe even October 7th was aimed to sabotage that. Where do you think we are in that issue now? Is that still our main goal? What we are doing now, is that contributing back to that track? Are we in trouble if we don't go to that track? I know it's broad, but help me in this dimension.
So Benjamin Netanyahu was for the Oslo process before he was against it. And as the years went by and he became more reassured in his position as prime minister, he decided that Hamas is an asset rather than a burden, because Hamas would be a counterweight to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank once Hamas took over Gaza in 2007. However, a week or so before October the 7th, he addressed the United Nations, and he said that Israel, in effect, has found a way to circumvent the Palestinian issue because it is making inroads into the Middle East along the lines that you, Reuven, just described. And this was the important point, that the Palestinians no longer have a veto over this process. Came October the 7th, and it turned out that the Palestinians do have a veto of sorts, at least for a while. Now we are back almost to square one, with the Saudis wishing to end the Gaza war, but demanding some path, some horizon to Palestinian statehood. And many in Israel are willing to pay this lip service and do it. But the government up to now is holding firm that this is too high a price.
General Kuperwasser, the issue of the two-state solution, very problematic in Israeli eyes, especially after October 7th, if it will be perceived, even if the idea will be perceived as a prize to Hamas. But in general, the fact that even the world now says, enough with this war already, get it over with and let's move towards a two-state solution. Can you give me your perspective on this concept? Is it even alive? Should we even use it in our rhetoric in order to move forward?
Well, it's not alive on the ground. It's definitely not from an Israeli point of view. There's no way a Palestinian state can be established at this point of time even in the foreseeable future. And the claim that the only solution is a two-state solution is not based on anything, because there are so many options available to those who want to solve this problem. And anyhow, it's not going to be solved as long as the Palestinians stick to their narrative. Their narrative is a narrative of struggle until Israel disappears, until Israel's demise. And that's the narrative not only of the Hamas, but also of the Palestinian Authority. It's the same thing taught by teachers in the Hamas controls education system and by the teachers in the PA controlled education system. And unfortunately also in UNRWA. So that's what they want to accomplish. They want a state that would be a step on the road to eliminating Israel. They are never going to be ready to accept Israel as a Jewish state, because according to their narrative, there's no such thing as a Jewish people. And because of that, the Jews do not deserve a state, and definitely not here, because according to their narrative, there was no sovereign history of Jews in this piece of land. Jews never had a state of their own in this piece of land. Regardless of the fact that this has nothing to do with history and the truth, this is what they teach their children. That's why they fight against the idea that there was a temple on Temple Mount, a Jewish temple on Temple Mount. There was no sovereign history. There couldn't be a temple. And it's crazy what they teach their children, totally false version of history. And they teach their children that Jews are such terrible creatures that nobody wants to live next to them. And that's why the colonialists and the imperialists got rid of the Jews by sending them to this piece of land, that land without a people, and that would be given to people without a land. And that's the story. And because of that, you have to fight against Israel until it disappears. That's the struggle element in this. And they fight not only for the Arab people and the Palestinian people, but they fight also for Islam. That's why it's very difficult to bring about a change in this narrative, because it's a mixture of mostly Islamic and national ideas that cannot be separated. And another very important element in this narrative is that they are the only victim of this conflict. And because of that, as victims, they cannot be criticized for choosing a certain way of action. And as victims, they are allowed to use all kinds of struggle, including terrorism. That's why 7th of October was justified. And you see that they managed to convince a lot of people that this is the case, because even the UN Secretary General Guterres, when he saw that what happened on 7th of October, he said, well, we have to look at the context to see if there is any context that justifies the 7th of October. This is unbelievable. The main effort of the Palestinians on both the Fatah side and the Hamas side is to inculcate this narrative in the minds of their constituencies, especially in the children's minds, and to convince the international community to adopt this narrative as well. What we're seeing these days, together, they work together with many people in the international community to make sure that the international community adopts it, and that makes much sense. The starvation campaign falls exactly in line with this idea. The Jews are such terrible creatures. They starve the victims, the Palestinian victims. That puts the Palestinians back in the position of a victim, and that's where the Europeans like to see them so eagerly. Yes, we want the Palestinians as victims to justify the way we criticize Israel. And that's why we can justify taking steps against Israel. Israel is the villain in this story. And I pay your attention to what the foreign minister of the UK said, Mr. Lamy, that said that we are doing it because in the Balfour Declaration, we promised state also to the Palestinians. And we haven't done it until now, so we are to blame for not for this. This is the original sin of the British, that they didn't give the Palestinian state. And now it's time to repent, and which of course has nothing to do with history, because the Balfour Declaration spoke only about civilian rights of the other communities in Palestine, as they call it at the time. So that's something that we have to remember to understand the depth of what stands behind the Europeans' tendency to recognize a Palestinian state.
Absolutely. This covers many of the issues that have to do with the great battle of narratives now, and some of them are even ridiculous. For instance, you're talking about the Jews, that historically and even now, our dream is reconciliation and peace. And Hamas, leading the war against us now, of course, is against the two-state solution. They want our annihilation. So everything you said from that perspective, I agree. General Gavish, a few minutes ago, you mistakenly called me Jonathan, but that's fine because I'm sitting in for Jonathan Hessen today. And he will be angry with me if we stick only to Gaza in this program today. So let me shift gears to Lebanon with you. We're still holding on to the key strongholds in the southern Lebanon, still striking Hezbollah targets. An emissary from Iran, it seems like a very troubled Iran, was in Lebanon when Lebanon is declaring the dismantling of Hezbollah. Where do you think we're standing in this perspective as far as how Iran sees it? And does Lebanon stand a chance of getting rid of Hezbollah as an armed branch?
Well, Reuven, first of all, Reuven, and the other thing, it's interesting because when you were sitting in our side, in our panel, we were discussing it a few months ago, and I think that both of us shared some optimism with regard to what is happening in Lebanon. So I would like to stay optimistic that Lebanon is going into the right way. It is very challenging. We're not there yet. There's a lot of obstacles in the way, but we do see a trend that is continuously within the last months. And we see that the Lebanese government is leaning more and more toward the West. There is, of course, the U.S. involvement, the French involvement, the Saudi involvement in Lebanon. This is from the one hand. From the second hand is we heard the last statement, and it looks like he wants to do more than just coming out with the statement. So I think that from the Lebanese point of view, we do see that the new government is willing and wanting to change the Lebanese arena and hopefully to disarm the Hezbollah. once again, it will take a lot of time, but the trend is there. The trend is there. I think that of course, for the Iranians, this is a very bad news. As you said, if we're looking back to the last convoy that they sent over, he even couldn't fly over Syria. He had to come over Turkey in order to visit Lebanon. That says a lot, because the Iranians have been completely blocked to rearm or to do anything, any activity with the Hezbollah toward Syria. Basically, the way of connecting with the Hezbollah, of course, to rearm them, all of those things are being armed. We could look at it under a broader perspective that probably there is now a big debate within Iran, asking themselves, we invested so many years on those proxies, and when the time came, they were not part of the war. So should we do it? And I'm sure that there is both sides of opinions over the one that would say, okay, let's re-look at it, and the other one which would say, let's go back and try to go back to this plan that we had before. I think that this convoy was part of looking of, where are we standing with the Lebanese? And I really hope that the signal that Iran got, which is basically a cold shoulder, I really hope that it would lead us to a right path with regards to Lebanon.
Thank you. Mr. Oren, in the same topic, what we do and what we say is very important in this context. Israelis, by the way, in situations like this, we like to rub it in. We like to take successes and, by the way, say that they're ours, sometimes even broaden the scope of that. In Lebanon, I think this is relevant. On the other hand, after October 7th, we need to be proactive. Our new strategy now is we don't let threats emerge. We take them out. We don't contain. We don't wait. What do you think the balance should be in Lebanon now as far as letting them do their thing without it being perceived as coerced by Israel?
So, Reuven, as Doron just said, he called you, Jonathan, as an honorific or as a generic host, because rather than address you as Colonel Ben Shalom, you're a Jonathan, at least for the day. But back to your topic. Deeds speak louder than words, and in Lebanon, the outgoing commanding general of the Northern Command, Major General Ori Gordon, had the balance sheet of the last 9 or so months, saying that Israel has killed 240 Hezbollah operatives ever since the ceasefire was declared, without Hezbollah reacting in any meaningful way, which means that Israel is able to enforce the security regime. It also has, of course, security positions within Lebanon, as it does within the Syrian territory adjacent to the Israeli-held Golan Heights. And therefore, your suggestion is right on the money. There is an internal Lebanese play. President Joseph Aoun, up to now, has been very strong in his demands that Hezbollah disarm. And there are outside pressures, American, Saudi, French, maybe Turkish. Israel should not speak so loudly as to be seen as the master of the game. Everyone knows that behind the scenes, it has quite a hand.
General Cooper-Wasser, you outrank me, but today I am a Jonathan, so I'm going to give you 1 minute. What's with a stockpile of enriched uranium in Iran? And I think that just recently, in the last few days, for the first time, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that it's there, and we even knew that it's going to remain there. What does this mean as far as Iran's nuclear capabilities?
Well, first of all, it's bad news that it's still there. Part of it was stored in the deep underground tunnel in Isfahan, and it's so deep that even the bombs of the Americans cannot reach it. I mean, they were trying, and I think they might have been successful in blocking their ability to reach the stockpile, even though they didn't hurt the stockpile itself. Some other parts were kept in Fordoux and in Natanz, and I think this part was hit and maybe is not available anymore. I don't think that we know exactly, and not at this time at least, how much was left of all the stockpiles they had, because it's not only the 408 kilograms of highly enriched uranium up to 60%, they have some others, a lot of 20% enriched uranium, a lot of 3.67% enriched uranium, and this should be accounted for as well. So it's not known what happened to that. But what's the good news is that in order to turn that into fissile material, you have to further enrich it to 90%, which is difficult to be done at this point because of the damage done to the enrichment facilities. And then you have to convert it into metal. And the facility that was supposed to do this job was severely damaged in Isfahan. And it's going to be difficult for them to go through that. And they don't know how to produce this kind of facility by themselves. They bought it from China. So the question is whether China is going to replenish it or not. And I think it's going to be very difficult for the Chinese to do that. It's going to take a very considerable risk on their behalf to be ready to do that. So I think that, yes, they have the material, and we have to make sure that they give it up in the context of some agreement and don't use it for further enrichment. But it's not as dangerous as it was before we took care of the conversion facility in Isfahan.
I see. Thank you. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Still very complex, going from the greater arena down to Gaza. Still remembering that we have 50 hostages, praying for their return, looking out for our wounded, the bereaved families, and even our brothers and sisters in Sweden, the Druze in Syria. So there's still a lot of suffering. I want to thank our panelists, experts for today, Mr. Oren, General Kupewasser, General Gavish. I would like to thank our viewers. Thank you for being with us today. See you next time. Shalom from Jerusalem.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.